All right, everyone. It's a Friday night, 10 p.m. Eastern time. It's time to strike up another live stream and talk some college football. Hope that you've had a great start to your weekend. Hope you can enjoy some time with us now talking college football. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe. So if you've been watching videos on Mark Rogers TV for a long time and you have yet to subscribe, please subscribe. It's not going to hurt to subscribe. If you're coming across Mark Rogers TV for the first time and you love college football, this is the place to be. Please subscribe, like, and comment. And I have been talking a little bit more about this in recent weeks than I ever have before. I used to never ask anyone to subscribe or like or comment, but I see from all these YouTubers all over the place that that's the thing to do. And I actually have and see suggestions from YouTubers. If you look at videos and articles on how to grow and build a YouTube channel, you're supposed to encourage people to subscribe, like, and comment. But I never used to do it at all, and I've been doing it over the last few weeks. So I'm going to continue to do it just because I want to build the channel. And I think you want me to build the channel because it's going to be a better channel in terms of content and guests and contributors and the time that I can spend devoting to the channel and the look and the quality and the content and all those things if I get those subscribers and those likes and those comments. All right. Want to let you know about a contest that we have that's running through July 15th. Many of you regulars will need to go to sleep maybe for 45 seconds while I explain this because you've heard it once or twice or 12 times. That's our buddy Alonzo1219. Alonzo1219, the U family, loves the Canes. He's got his YouTube channel right there. So you need to go subscribe to him if you haven't. And then after you have subscribed to Alonzo, whoever is a subscriber to Alonzo1219 and brings me the most YouTube subscribers between now and July 15th, at least 10, the most YouTube subscribers coming to Mark Rogers TV will get some serious swag from Alonzo. So you've got to check out his channel to see exactly what he did come on here about 2 weeks ago and did display the chain. You can go with the Canes chain, the turnover chain, or some other kind of swag that you would like to have of your favorite college football team. So again, subscribe to Alonzo1219. Bring more subscribers to me than anyone else, and you will win swag from Alonzo1219. And it's serious swag. It's not junk. It's not trash. You can get a hat, you can get a t-shirt, or you can go, again, with the bling and size up either the turnover chain or something like it with a motif of your favorite college football team. All right. I, of course, will strike up the live chat. And something I would like to go to very soon. I really need to take some time and look into what I need to do to either just generically set up a separate phone line and just take calls and have them go through the mic, or do it the right way in terms of any kind of software where I could take calls from you, because that's something that I've wanted to do my entire career. And at some point, maybe we'll do that show where I just kind of sit back and I let you guys ask me questions about my background, my career, so you can know a little bit more about me and what my background is. And I can explain a little bit more of why I'm doing this and what I've done in the past. We'll get to that at some other point. But I've always, the one thing that I haven't done, I've done play-by-play and I've anchored and reported and done different things at different outlets. But the one thing I've never done was have a call-in show. And I would love to have a call-in show. And so I need to look into that. To have the back and forth would be just the best, because I'm trying to get you guys involved. And you've seen that over the last several months, where I've really opened up the live streams and the live chat to provide you guys with the opportunity to voice your opinion. We are the voice of college football. We We are the voice of college football. So when I first thought of that, the guy, whoever it was that was commenting to me about being the voice of college football, I certainly appreciated his sentiment that I am the voice of college football. And everybody I mentioned that to was like, yeah, you are the voice of college football. And I thought, well, that sounds nice. And I would like to be respected and held in that light to a certain extent, but we are the voice of college football. So you've got a voice, I've got a voice. I bring on the best bloggers and broadcasters and writers, best guests in the business. Where do you go and find college football analysis from a host who actually knows what he's talking about? And then he brings in guests that know what they're talking about. You may not always agree with us, agree with me, agree with my guests, but in terms of breaking down teams and personnel and issues and instant analysis on news, I don't see this happening anywhere else. So we bring you the best in college football coverage. We are the voice of college football. So over the last few days, we have heard from Matt Moscona from ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, and New Orleans, talking LSU Tigers. That was a fun conversation from today. Please check it out. We talked the Derek Stingley commit, the five-star cornerback to LSU recruiting overall, the Joe Burrow situation, the outlook for a team that, according to Vegas, is only going to win 7 or 7.5 games. Also had a discussion today with Chris Light. You probably don't know who Chris Light is, but you definitely know what he manages. He is the managing editor for Athlon Sports. He is also the co-host of the Cover 2 podcast. It's good stuff. And Chris and I mixed it up today talking college football and looking at the landscape of college football. It was a fun conversation. Also on Thursday night, we had our UCLA blowout, just a blowout party on the Bruins, all UCLA for 75 minutes with Tony Siracusa from Last Word on College Football and Mike Regalado from Gojo Bruin, and we talked up UCLA football. It was a fun time. All right. We also have released a video recently on the top 5 quarterbacks in the SEC and the top 5 running backs in the SEC. Also, the top 10 non-conference games in college football, ACC top 5 running backs, Arizona State, Nebraska, TCU live streams in recent days with top bloggers from Rivals and other outlets for Arizona State, Nebraska, and TCU. Live streams all over the place over the past week or two to bring you college football coverage. Coming up this week, we are going to knock out top 5 in the SEC at wide receiver and tight end. We're also going to have a big blowout Buckeyes party on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. Steve Hellwagon of 247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, and Claire Crawford's joining me as we mix it up on the Buckeyes. So we're going to do what we did last night with UCLA. We're going to try to do that with as many teams as possible. Bring on the best people available and just talk up that team forever. Just let them go to it, shred that program up from top to bottom, and give you the insight that you need. All right, before I open up the chat, I'd like to remind you that over the last few days, we've talked about the top 5 at every position in college football for every conference and the top 10 nationally. So I've enjoyed looking at your lists as well. And also tonight, I'm going to throw out the question, if you could change anything in college football, if you could change anything about your team, change anything about your team, change anything about your conference, change anything about college football, what would you change? We love this game. College football is the best, but it's not perfect. What would you change? All right, let's strike up the live chat and see what you guys have for me tonight, and we will get to it. And as always, I would like you guys to tell me what guests you want to see on here. So, for example, there's nobody out of bounds here. I will ask Paul Feinbaum, and I have asked him several times to come on. Now, these people may not necessarily come on the show, but you keep knocking and knocking and knocking and knocking, or you go for these 10 and one says yes, and it's a great get. Again, Chris Light today with Athlon Sport. You got to check out that conversation. It was really good. All right, on the chat tonight, what do we got going here? All right, 98 Sports Talk. 98 Sports Talk and I just could not connect the other night. So I was trying to filter through and find the best comments from you guys the other night. And I was responding to so many people. And for some reason, 98 Sports Talk jumped in about 98 times, but I never saw him and just missed his comments and never replied. And then I kind of sent him an apology to say, hey, you had some great comments tonight. You brought up some good topics and some good points, and I just missed them all. So my bad. 98 Sports Talk. Let's get together here soon. Bring you on. We'll talk Georgia Bulldogs. Let's do that. Ryan's on the line. William's on the line. Hit the bell. Got NCIS Fanatic 21. Mark, I'm playing NHL 18 on my PlayStation 4 right now. NCIS Fanatic 21. I don't know how you do it. That's all I'll say. Prince, 6'1". What are we going with there? Oh, the Buckeyes, the Buckeyes, the Buckeyes. Yes. Wholesome Holloway, the U family. What's up, Mark? I got your message. I'm extremely excited. Yes, I checked out your latest video, and you have come very, very well recommended and would love to chat Canes with you. So get back to me, Wholesome One Holloway, MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and we will talk it up and we'll figure out when you can come on. Pro Sports Central, I've seen you in recent days. Good to see you. Again, Prince 6'1", Panther Pro 22, jumping online. Mark, there's an app that spoofs a fake number and you can use your real phone. Okay, I'll have to look that up. I'll just write up spoof phone. Ask Uncle Lou which app he uses. I could do that. Would love a call-in show. Let's break down the SEC, Mark. Tim Watts on Bama football. Tim Watts. We'll go after him. Steve Dace, my guy. Big Bubba Blue. Big Bubba, I have not seen you on here before. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV. You evidently have caught Steve here, and he does a great job. Steve, sometimes, because he's opinionated and likes to tell it like it is from his perspective, sometimes makes not necessarily enemies, but based on the comments, he's not the warm, fuzzy guy that is on here just making friends. And so a lot of people have made some disparaging comments about Steve. And I love it, actually. Not that I want to see him get trashed, but I sometimes see channels out there and see other products online where they're just kind of giving you a soft touch and not much opinion and really don't break it down or take a stand on anything, and everybody's happy about it, and therefore there's no good healthy give and take. That's what we like to see here. Top 10 non-conference video was good. Thank you, fill in. Not Ohio State fan, but what will be interesting on Wednesday? William Lee, yeah. So they're really good people too, William. So you're talking Claire Crawford. I don't know if you've seen her on here, but she loves the Buckeyes and does a great job. Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, he breaks down the personnel like nobody. And Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports, Big Ten senior writer. That's pretty much all I have to say about his credentials. No Bama or Georgia in the top 10. Okay, fill in. You commented to the video. Let's understand something here. I was running down the top 10 non-conference matchups for 2018. Alabama is playing Louisville. That's their toughest game. Georgia is playing Georgia Tech. That's their toughest game. These are not two of the top 10 non-conference games this year. Having two of the best teams in the country and playing two of the best games in the non-conference schedule don't need to match. I was watching some of your old videos from 2014, and I saw a video that you posted that said no one from the Big Ten would something the national championship in 2014. I can't really speak to that. I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't even know what that statement means. So NCIS Fanatic 21, if you could restate that in some type of readable way. I've been around, just don't comment, just love listening. Big Bubba Blue. Too bad. 28. Great question. For my team, I'd change our defense. For college football, I'd eliminate preseason polls, the playoff committee, and use a computer point system. Mark, what pro quarterback does Tua Tagovailoa remind you of most? Well, if we want to go the left-handed route, he's mobile. He has a better arm, I would say, than Jake Locker, who was a top 15 pick in the NFL draft, or a top 15 to 20 pick by Tennessee in the NFL draft. So I'm going to go the lefty route first and foremost, and that really sizes down the field because there aren't many left-handed quarterbacks. Steve Young, Kenny Stabler, some of those classic guys. Left-handed, those are the guys that come to mind, but I would need to see Tua play just a little bit more in regards to really the aspects of his game that matter, just in terms of the way he looks throwing the ball. He has a different throwing motion than Steve Young. So that's a difficult one. But the first guy that came to mind was Jake Locker, just because they're left-handed and mobile. And Jake Locker had a successful career at Washington and parlayed that into a top 15 selection in the NFL draft. Now, he got hurt in the NFL and didn't play and turned out to be a bust. The Wholesome One, Holloway, the U family, just sent the email. I feel honored to be able to speak with you in front of the voice of college football. Wholesome One, Holloway, me as well. Tired of SEC schedules, cupcake SEC schedules. So maybe Warren Moon, is that the comparison to Tua? Steve Young? Yeah, but okay, so from a scrambling standpoint, yeah, they're both mobile. Steve Young would make some crazy outlandish plays. We remember the one that he made against the Minnesota Vikings where he just dodges a bunch of guys and then he makes the dive toward the end zone where he stumbles in for the touchdown. That's one of the great plays in NFL history. I hear Russell Wilson the most. Yeah, I would have to say that before the national championship game, I may have seen Tua throw a couple passes, because think about it. He didn't throw any meaningful passes. He mopped up against the bad teams, and I wasn't watching. I am not watching Alabama when it's 45-7 against Tennessee in the fourth quarter. I'm not watching them mop up a 59-0 game against Vandy like they had last year. So those games aren't on my radar, and I'm not going back to watch Tua throw 3 passes. So I've not really watched him play other than the fourth quarter and overtime against Georgia. So what is more impressive than anything is his ability to go into a pressure situation cold and keep his calm, not make drastic throws that a lot of quarterbacks would feel pressured to do to make the big throw. He did what he needed to do. It was a 2-possession game, and he avoided the rush. He had that one play where he got jammed up in the middle in the pocket. He spun away, and he bounced off a few guys. Then he made the play downfield. And then, of course, the final throw. So the throw and the accuracy and the velocity on the throw and the trajectory to the corner of the end zone with just enough touch versus enough zip at the same time is the impressive thing. But also, what was impressive about that throw was, think about it. Georgia kicked the field goal. They were up by 3. Alabama gets the ball. Tua gets sacked. It's 2nd and 18. So they're out of field goal range, especially considering Alabama's issues kicking field goals. So what do most quarterbacks do in this situation? It's 2nd and 18. They're down by 3 in overtime. They dump it off. The play call is for a dump off, and the quarterback dumps the ball off to a back, and they try to get half that yardage back to set up a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. Then thinking, okay, we've got about a 40 or 50% shot of converting the 3rd down to keep the drive alive to try to win the game. Or even if we don't, we get the ball a little bit closer and we have a reasonable field goal attempt to extend this game and get it to a second overtime. So we can't go for the first down right here. Then it sets up 3rd and 18, and you talk about being in trouble. You're in trouble. So most coaches and most quarterbacks, by extension, what they do is they go for the safe play. They go for the dump off play. They try to set something up via bubble screen, slip screen, tunnel screen, or just a dump down to a back with a couple blockers in front to get half that yardage back to go the conservative route and extend the game. He wouldn't have any of it. He saw, and at the point that Devonta Smith, and this was a veteran play as well from this standpoint, from the point that he threw the ball, it's easy to look at the play when the ball's 3/4 through the air and almost made it and landed to its target to say, Devonta Smith was open. He burned the corner who played up and took a false step and got burned, and the safety wasn't going to get over. But at the point that Tua released that ball, he saw that develop. Devonta Smith had not yet quite burned the corner, but based on their body language and where they were positioned and how and what direction they were facing, that was the right quarterback play to make, because he knew, even though they're stride for stride right now, even though they're basically even on the field, Devonta's going the right way and the corner's going the wrong way, and he's going to be open in about 3 strides, and bam, he let it fly. Bama plays Mercer a lot. Best rivalry ever. Fill in. You're just not going to give it up, are you? NCIS Fanatic 21. I meant to say I saw a video you posted from 2014 that said nobody from the Big Ten would win the national championship after we lost to Virginia Tech and Michigan State lost to Oregon. Sorry. I don't know what to tell you. The Big Ten at that point, Michigan lost to Notre Dame. Ohio State lost to Virginia Tech. As you mentioned there, Michigan State lost that game at Oregon. And Wisconsin lost several games that year. I believe they finished 10-3. So it was pretty conventional thought that how is Ohio State, for example, going to lift itself to a national college football playoff? Because it's one thing to lose an out-of-conference game, let's say, and then win the conference, and the rest of the conference looks strong because they won their non-conference games. But everybody was losing in the Big Ten at that point. Everybody lost their non-conference games, everybody that meant something. And so it felt as though, okay, Ohio State, pick your team, Ohio State, Michigan State, whoever it is, might run the table in the Big Ten, but it's not going to look good because the Big Ten lost all its meaningful games early in the season. That was the consensus. For most of you who have only been watching for the last few weeks or several months, I know I had a number of you ask. I asked you how long you've been watching, and it seemed like the consensus was basically within the last few weeks, last few months, or the last couple of years. I actually think, unfortunately, this doesn't say a whole lot for my channel, but I have really focused on guests recently where if you go back to 2014, 2013, where NCIS Fanatic is talking about, I was just blasting away at the analysis myself. So, for example, we're pushing July right now. At this point, if it was 2013, 2014, I had made a full blown preview on every Power Five team and prediction on the season. Najee. Najee good, but he needs a little more work. So you may have caught that we ran down our top 5 running backs in the SEC last night with Mike Laval from Last Word on College Football and our guy Stephen M. Smith from Touchdown Alabama. My top 5 included DeAndre Swift. I was trying to determine and remember whether it was DeAndre Swift or Damian Harris. Swift at 1, Damian Harris at 2. I had Benny Snell at 3. I had, I believe, Arius Williams at 4. And I'm forgetting who else. I had Travion Williams at 4 and Arius Williams, Mississippi State at 5. That was my 5, but Najee Harris was on my list. And man, he looked really good when he got the ball in his hands last year. Najee good, but he needs a little more work. I read that. He getting hella reps this year. I shouldn't even start to read some of these comments. Lamar says Josh Jacobs is the best running back on Bama's roster. And Lamar, if you watch our Bama segments with Stephen M. Smith, he's been talking about Josh Jacobs and his ability also to get out of the backfield and catch the ball in space and make something happen. It's impressive. I went back after one of our conversations and I looked up Josh Jacobs' receptions for Bama, and he's got good hands and he makes moves in the open field and makes something happen. Swift might not even be the best running back on Georgia's roster. I get that, but he ran for 7.6 yards per carry. I lined up the efforts that he had against the likes of Auburn in the SEC title game, Kentucky, Mississippi State, which has a legitimate top 10 defense. And he ran for 8 to 10 yards per carry against those defenses. And this year he's going to get the reps. So 98 Sports Talk, you know your team better than I do. But, and I did talk about Tamir White and did highlight that, and I had trouble convincing Mike of this, but you guys probably get this, that if we went back to any college football season, after the season and ranked the top 5 at every position in any particular conference, we would see scads of freshmen, not as many as sophomores and juniors, seniors, maybe because so many leave an elite conference after their junior season. But so I was taking a little bit of heat for ranking Lorenzo Lingard in the top 5 running backs in the ACC in particular, and now taking some heat from Mike for ranking Tua as not only a top 5 quarterback in the SEC, but the number 1 quarterback in the SEC. Cashboy D, he should shake back this year. I believe he's talking about, I don't know who he's talking about. Let's see. Zamir White is a true freshman, by the way. All right. So again, top 10 national lists, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line, defensive line, corners, safeties, linebackers, special teams. Top 5 at any position within a conference as well. No need to apologize. I just looking back at old videos, knowing how everything turned out. Yeah, it's funny to look back on. And if there was a way for me to, and that's the problem with YouTube or really any site, is obviously those videos are still there to be watched, but who's going to watch them? Because you want to know what's going to happen in the future, not necessarily in the past. That said, I am shocked at times of how many people watch old videos. Now, some of them, there's an X factor there. For example, Elika Sadeki or Taylor Rooks, if you know who I'm talking about, those videos are still getting views for a particular reason. But sometimes I am surprised that old prediction videos will get some views because they're worthless right now. Josh Jacobs is the best running back on Bama's roster. I think I read that. I'm trying to scroll down here. I'm way behind. Okay, 98, top of the morning to you, Lamar. All right. Talking to his boy, 98 Sports Talk. All right. So it's difficult for me to follow the chat because you guys strike up your own conversations here. My opinion of LSU is what is skewed. Lamar, did you happen to check out my conversation today with Matt Moscona from ESPN Radio? You'll need to check that out. That was a great talk on LSU football. Ran down the Burrow conversation, the backup situation with Brennan and McMillan and Narcisse, the commitment of course, the five-star cornerback, and the recruiting since April 1st, which has been pretty outstanding for LSU. We talked about what Vegas says in LSU winning 7 or 7.5 games, and then our thoughts. And we ran down just the psyche of the fan base right now, and this being a season of low expectations for LSU. And with more, as I stated, and posed the question to Matt, more unknowns, more wild cards, X factors, questions than I've ever seen with LSU football. Going back to at the point Nick Saban took over LSU. Lamar Stevens, everyone is very, very high on Clemson's D-line. Would they be as menacing in the SEC? They are good, but aren't we numb towards great D-line play as SEC guys? All right, I understand what you're saying there, because if you match up D lines across the board in the SEC versus the ACC, there's no comparison team to team. But the Clemson defensive line, according to NFL scouts, they don't care where these kids play. Sure, they look at the competition, but if a kid is playing for a group of 5 school and they say he's a stud, these guys get drafted all the time from the group of 5 in the first round of the NFL draft. So I hear what you're saying is that the Clemson defensive line looks better because they're playing weaker offensive lines in the ACC. I don't know. I think that's speculative. Year to year to year, the defensive line play in the SEC is better than anywhere else. The DN play, the D tackle play, both positions. I appreciate you giving love to Lingard and Cam Davis going into the season. Yeah, I also mentioned Cameron Davis, who is the. It's so funny when. Also, maybe Wholesome Holloway, you can clarify here. The third-rated running back coming out of high school football last year is that kid. I can't remember his first name. Cook. Is he expected to get into the mix? Because everybody focuses on the number 1 running back, but this kid's number 3 in the nation. They're really a difference. So he may have a shot at some playing time as well. 3 big non-conference games week 1. LSU, Miami, Michigan, Notre Dame. James Cook is good. So yes, as fill-in alludes to a number of times here, I did rank the top 10 non-conference games in college football. Michigan, Notre Dame, number 1, and I ran down the rest of my list. Raekwon Davis, a first-round talent, of course, from Alabama. All right, you guys, if you can change anything in college football, what would you change? You guys know me. I didn't even finish my scheduling, did I? So if you guys have not been watching me for long, okay, James Cook, not an early enrollee, got it. Still not on campus, but it's the running back position. There's a lot less to learn there. Washington, Auburn, of course, yes, week 1. That one intrigues me. Certainly big game for the Pac-12. Auburn could lose that game against Washington. If they win the SEC, they're going to the playoff. Washington can win the Pac-12 and not necessarily go to the playoff. But if they have a win against Auburn and Auburn finishes in the top 15 in the country and Washington has a win over Auburn and wins the Pac-12 championship, then that puts the Huskies in better position, of course. I didn't like Cook's film so much. He lacks some lateral quickness and explosiveness in my eye, but he can be a good change of pace back and rotational back. Do you think that the third rated running back in the nation is just going to be a change of pace back, Lamar? Big Bubba Blue wants to change the replay system. And if you can explain that succinctly, please do. Get rid of conference championship games since they don't matter anymore. Paco, I gotta, I gotta, I gotta kind of decompress from that one. So you're right; they kind of don't matter anymore. Ohio State won one last year. Alabama didn't even get to one last year. That didn't matter. And USC, they won their conference championship. Didn't matter, but they should matter. Conference championships have to matter. So, two things need to change in college football. Of course, the scheduling. Hopefully, you guys have caught my scheduling videos. So, what I did is I looked at each conference, and I think I have the non conference here as well, maybe. So, and I talked about this with Chris Light of Athlons today. He actually even brought this up, and I said, thank you. Somebody's thinking along with me on this one. How can it be fair that two teams play in the SEC Eastern Division? Any two teams, it doesn't matter. Two teams play in the same division, and they play the same exact schedule within the division, of course. Then they play two games against the other division, and those are the two games that separate their schedule. And one team plays two teams that went 14-2 last year, and the other team plays two teams that went 4-12 in the conference last year. How is that fair? That provides a huge disparity in scheduling. That should not happen. That needs to change in college football. That's number one. The conference scheduling is awful. Nebraska is playing Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State. They went 20-7. So the three teams that Nebraska played, yes, last year in the Big Ten went 20-7. And the only reason there are 7 losses is because Michigan lost those games to all those really good teams. So Nebraska by far plays the toughest non-division schedule in the Big Ten. There's another team in the Big Ten. While Nebraska is playing 3 teams that went 20-7 in the conference last year, there's another team in the Big Ten. I can't remember exactly who it is that plays 3 teams that went 6-21. And again, I don't know if you guys got a chance to see this video, or it may have come out before you guys were watching. But I corrected all that. I still maintain the rivalries that matter. So take the SEC, the cross-division rivalries, Alabama, Tennessee, got to keep that. For you new college football fans, you're probably thinking, why do Alabama and Tennessee have to play? Big deal. They have to play. It is the second greatest rivalry in the conference, maybe third. So Alabama and Tennessee have to play. Auburn and Georgia, the South's oldest rivalry, they have to play. LSU, Florida have a good thing going, and that's built into a rivalry, and it means something. So that's fine. Let's keep that one. The other 4 teams in each division, the other 4 teams, yes, they don't have to have designated rivals. It means nothing that Mississippi State and Kentucky have to play every year. That's stupid. So that clogs up your scheduling. That binds your scheduling. Keep Alabama, Tennessee. Keep LSU and Florida, and certainly keep Georgia and Auburn. Every year they play. But the other ones, free up your scheduling options by getting rid of these stupid, non-existent rivalries that don't work and don't matter, that nobody cares about. Kentucky fans will not care if you take Mississippi State off their schedule, or Ole Miss that you're taking Vanderbilt off their schedule. Those are the locked-in rivalries in the SEC. Get rid of those, and that frees up flexibility within the SEC schedule to make it equitable. And I'll get to this in just a second on the live chat. The same thing in the ACC. What rivalries matter in the ACC cross division? North Carolina, North Carolina State, certainly. Clemson, Georgia Tech, I don't really care about it. Few do outside of those two programs, but apparently, according to our Clemson guy, Ryan Cantor from Shaking the Southland, he says that Clemson, Georgia Tech matters, so keep it. And then, of course, Florida State, Miami, that matters. Those three matter. The other ones, BC and Virginia Tech, are designated rivals in the ACC. Virginia Tech and BC, come on. Syracuse and Pitt, it makes sense to a certain extent just because they came from the Big East, but who cares? That doesn't matter. So get rid of those and you create scheduling flexibility. Again, you don't know what I'm talking about here. Please watch the video I basically labeled it How to Fix ACC Scheduling, something like that. Fixing ACC scheduling, fix the ACC. I fixed the Big Ten and the SEC and the Pac-12. I fixed them all. We have two teams in the Pac-12 South Division who, again, of course, play the exact schedule within the division. But one school, I believe it's Arizona, plays three teams from the North that went 12-24 last year. And Utah has to play three teams that went 24-12. Stupid. So that's the first thing I change is the conference scheduling. The next thing I change is the non-conference scheduling. So you've got 4 non-conference games in the ACC and the SEC. And the others play 3. That has to be changed. That has to be standardized to either an 8-game or a 9-game conference season. I would vote for the 9 games for a number of reasons. If you play in a 14-team conference, you're missing 5 teams every year. You're only playing some of the teams in your conference once every 6 years. You're playing there are 6 teams in your conference in the ACC and the SEC that you're only seeing once every 6 years. Is that being in a conference? Bash gaming. I've tried Bosch, I've tried Bash, but I kind of reasoned that if it was Bosch, it would be like Bosch and Lom. Is that it? Or like Chris Bosch, who I don't believe has a C in his name. So I went with Bash. Bash Gaming is top 5 American Conference quarterbacks. Mackenzie Milton, Central Florida at number 1, who is my number 9 at quarterback in the nation. De'Eric King from Houston at number 2. Jonathan Banks, 3 from Tulane at number 4. Hayden Moore from Cincinnati. Malcolm Perry from Navy. I was actually just given credentials today from the American Conference to go to their conference football media days at the end of July. So I'll probably make that trip. And I've done that in past years. I'm glad we've done scheduling cupcakes in our future schedules, or we're done scheduling cupcakes. Panther Pro 22, I'm totally against only going to 6 teams and having buys. It would place too much value and importance on being the top 2 teams, and they would still have to be selected by someone. Thank you, Panther Pro. Hopefully you thought that up all by yourself, and I believe you did. And if not, hey, take the credit. But that's what I've been saying for years for these people that have said, yeah, 4 is not enough because we're leaving out a conference champion, at least one conference champion this year too. So let's go to 6, and then we'll have a wild card, and then we'll have 2 buys. Okay, well, you've created almost a similar issue in that you are giving a huge advantage to 2 teams. All right, look back at the college football playoff over the last, since it started, 2014. Tell me who should have received the buys. Who should have received the buys this past year? We had Clemson 1, Georgia 2, Oklahoma 3, Alabama 4. So the buys would have gone to Georgia and they would have gone to Clemson. Okay, all of these teams lost one game. Now, Alabama got shoved to the 4th spot because they didn't win a conference championship. So I'm all for that. They actually shouldn't have been there anyway. But so separate Georgia and Oklahoma. Georgia won the SEC with one loss. Oklahoma won the Big 12 with one loss. It was difficult to separate those two teams. And in our current system, for as bad as it is, being number 2 and being number 3 doesn't matter. It just changes your jersey. So you get to wear the jersey you want if you're the 2 seed. If you're the 3 seed, you don't get to do that. But other than that, you're playing the same game in the same stadium against the same opponent. So it matters none that you are the 2 seed or the 3 seed. But if you go to a 16 playoff, being the 2 seed and the 3 seed is enormous. Playing an extra game in college football, that is huge. That's a huge advantage. So in this past playoff, you would give that advantage to Georgia and Clemson over Oklahoma. Not fair. 2016, we of course had Alabama 1, Clemson 2, Ohio State 3, Washington 4. Alabama Clemson would have been the 2 teams to receive buys. That would have seemed logical because they seemed, and this is in aftermath, this is hindsight, which is 2020, that they were the 2 best teams. And Ohio State did not win the conference championship, so they have no claim to a bye, certainly. In my opinion, should not have been in the playoff. And your 4th place team was Washington, who played a horrendous non-conference schedule. So people wouldn't have had a huge issue with that, but I would have, that Washington would have had to play an extra game. All right, in 2015, you had Clemson 1, Alabama 2, Michigan State 3, and Oklahoma 4. Again, you're separating one-loss conference champions across the board. Clemson was the undefeated team. Alabama, Michigan State, and Oklahoma all won conference championships, and they had one loss. And so you're saying that Alabama gets the bye for what reason? Because the College Football Playoff Selection Committee thinks they're the second best team. They're a conference champion, just like Michigan State and just like Oklahoma, and they all had one loss. So, yeah, separating number 2 and number 3, impossible and stupid. And anybody who thinks there should be a 16 playoff, the only thing that makes sense about that is including all the conference champions. The bye doesn't work. Base it on strength of schedule. No, fill in, do this. Go to 8 teams. And I enjoyed that Chris Light from Athlon Sports today when I brought it up. And I really highly suggest that you go back and watch that video because we talked all the, I don't have my notes in front of me because the direction that I steered this was to talk about the college football playoff selection, to talk about this year's conference races and the cut and dry nature. Unfortunately, as much as I love college football, the kind of cut and dry nature of the 3 best conferences this year, the ACC, the SEC, that would be the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten. It looks like Clemson, Miami, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Georgia, Alabama. Hopefully somebody's going to break that up. But yes, an 18 playoff, Stickman 83. 18 playoff instead of conference championships. No, you still play conference championships. So, Mike Laval, love the guy, does a great job, smart guy, articulate. I don't know that you guys have seen him on here. I don't know. Mike Laval, last word on college football, one of my very best guests. But he just drives me nuts about an 8-team playoff watering down the season. Okay. We have 12 out of 32 teams in the NFL make the playoffs. We have 12 of 30 in baseball. we've got 10 of 30 in baseball. We've got 16 of 30 in the NBA. And I understand they're different sports, but this is 8 out of 130. So in the other sports where between 35 and 50% of the teams make the playoffs, we're still, even if we double it and expand it to 8 out of 130, I did the math, 6%. You are still in the elite of the sport. 6% make the college football playoff. Would it have been that horrible if Penn State would have made the college football playoff this past year? They lost 2 games. One was to Ohio State, a game they dominated for 3.5 quarters. By 1 point, they lost in Columbus, and they lost after a rain and lightning delay at Michigan State on the road by 3 points on a last-second field goal. Would it have been just the most horrible thing to allow Penn State to play in the playoffs, or to allow Central Florida, who won all of its games and ended up beating Auburn, who was the only team in the country to beat 2 number 1 teams, Georgia and Alabama, by the way, the 2 teams that played for the national championship, to allow that Central Florida team to prove itself against the best teams in the country? Would that have been so horrible? And for anybody, and I'll get to it, Bosch Gaming, I'm going to go with Bash. Do I go with Bosch? Anyway, so this is still, if you allow 8 of 130 to make the playoff, it's 6%. The top 6% of anything's great, of almost anything. 6% of the entire league. This would be like the NFL. This is still like the Super Bowl. That's like the top 6% of the NFL going to the Super Bowl. 8 make it out of 130 in FBS. So think about this. So Mike's next point, and I'm not trashing on Mike because he knows, again, that I just think he is the greatest, and his support for this channel has been phenomenal, and he is welcome anytime and does an exceptional job for us. But if he's watching this or this gets back to him, I'm just raising his argument that probably represents a lot of people's arguments out there against an 18 playoff, that we would have marginal teams make the playoff. Well, if you're in the top 8 of 136%, you're not marginal. Secondly, yes, 2 lost teams would make the playoff, but I've got news for you. A 2-loss team is about to make the playoff very soon. It almost happened this year with Ohio State. Had Auburn won the SEC championship game over Georgia, it would have happened, and nobody would have had an issue with it because it was a SEC champion with 2 losses. So a 2-loss team is going to make the playoff anyway. The other thing that I keep hearing is that it waters down the end of the season. You know what? If anything, it makes more games meaningful. So in this hyper focused era of college football on the playoff, where everyone's focused on the playoff, and in particular years, let's go back 2 seasons to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State playing the last game of the season in the Big 12, and really most of us were like, who cares? They can't make the playoff, so we're focusing on these other games because they impact the playoff. Those are the games that are getting focused. Well, this is going to provide more games that have meaning the last 2 weeks of the season if there's an 18 playoff. And my last point that also goes in the face of the argument that the 8th best team in the country is undeserving of winning the national championship. Again, look at any other sport, and if the 8 seed, not that there's an 8 seed because they play in 2 separate conferences, but if the 4 seed in the NFL wins the Super Bowl, nobody bats an eye. Or the 4 seed in Major League Baseball or the NBA wins the championship and proves over the course of those 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that they're the best team. They earned the spot, and then they won the tournament. Nobody would have an issue with this, especially considering if you're the 8th best team in college football. First of all, we don't know you're the 8th best team. We're just ranking you 8th. You might be the 3rd best team. You might be the 12th best team. We know that you're one of the best teams. Do we know that you're 8th That's ridiculous. I get sick of this. We're selecting the 4 best teams. We don't know who the 4 best teams are until they actually get to the playoff and play. Okay, so back to the point about the 8 teams is that it's been told to me again that if a number 8 seed won the national championship, that it would be undeserving. Okay, this number 8 team would be a 2-loss team, so they'd be 11-2 before the playoff. Okay, they're 11-2. To win a playoff of 8 teams, the number 8 team in the country would have to beat 3 of the 7 best teams in the country consecutively. Can you imagine if you're Michigan State and you're the 8th seed, let's say, and you just dusted off Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, and Oklahoma, Georgia, Miami, and USC in consecutive weeks, that you didn't deserve, that you didn't earn that championship? If you're an 11-2 team to start the playoff, and then you just go out and beat 3 of the 7 best teams in the country, and one of them has to be the number 1 team because the 1-8 game is the first round game. So you went out and beat the number 1 team, then you beat 2 of the other 7 best teams in the country, 3 of the 7 best total. You've earned it. You've earned it. Playoff committee rewards cupcake schedules, boring seasons for college football. Fill in, man, he has got an agenda against Alabama football. Stickman 83, that number 18 would be the American Conference champ with a record of 12-1, but they wouldn't deserve a shot. Exactly. And you guys know from these live streams that I'm always contemplating what the next best content should be, and I never quite have the time to knock out as much as I'd like to. Maybe I should be doing that instead of doing these live streams. But Ryan Day, got it. Thank you. NCIS Fanatic 21. Prince 6'1", 3 extra games and a lot of football. Would you take 1 game off the regular season schedule? All right, Prince. 11-2, that's 13. Okay. The 2 teams that went to the national championship game this year played 15 games. Well, Alabama played 1 less because they didn't make the conference championship game. But in most seasons, because they play a conference championship game, the team that wins the national championship and the team that loses the national championship game, they play 15 games. In this scenario, I'm expecting 1 other game, but also think about this. If that number 8 seed usually would not be a conference champion, so maybe they didn't even get to the conference championship game. Therefore, they're 10-2, 12 games. They play 3 in the playoff if they play all the way through, and they play 15 games. So there might be a scenario in which somebody plays a 16-game season. You are correct, but they're playing 15 right now. Ryan Day is the offensive coordinator, so you might have trouble getting him on. Yes, he is the offensive coordinator. I probably won't be able to get him on, but I will certainly try. And that has been another thought, as it's been difficult for me to round up the actual head coaches of the schools, but to go for the offensive and defensive coordinators. And it's funny, NCIS Fanatic 21, because as soon as you said that, I was just like, yeah, Ryan Day, got it. Then I thought, Ryan Day? That Ryan Day? Okay. This year, number 8 was USC. 2016 was Florida State. 2015 was Notre Dame. 2014 was Michigan State. No one has a problem with those specific teams. Okay, let's look at this. So Bosch Gaming is strictly going with the rankings. So I'm thinking that if we go to 8 teams, we've got the 4 conference champions, and we've 4 conference champions, the 5 conference champions, and 3 wild cards. And then people have suggested that one of those 3 wild cards would always be a group of 5 champion. And that would provide them entry into the playoff automatically. Maybe they would have to have a certain record. But even if they didn't, I would have no issue with the group of five, whoever would be the best, and that would have to be decided. This particular year in 2017, of course, Central Florida was obviously the number one team out of the group of five with the undefeated record. But some years you would have two teams that were both 11-2 and conference champions out of the group of five. So there would have to be a selection process there some years, but it would just go by record. But then there would be a tie and there would have to be a selection. These live streams get long and I have to kick back after a while. So the way it's proposed here is to go with the number 8 team in the country. That may not always work out. So, for example, this year in the Big Ten, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Penn State were all highly ranked, and maybe you don't want 3 from the same conference. So it may not always turn out to be the actual number 8 ranked team. It may be somebody else. Sometimes it would be, but you go with the 5 conference champions out of the Power 5, the one group of 5. So you've got 6, and then you've got 2 wild cards. And so for this season, you've got the 5 Power 5 champions. Central Florida makes 6. Then you've got 2 wild cards, which would have obviously been Alabama. And then most obviously it goes to Wisconsin. This year would have been pretty clear cut. Georgia wins the SEC. Clemson wins the ACC. Ohio State out of the Big Ten. Oklahoma out of the Big 12. The Pac-12 sends USC. Central Florida is the best in the group of 5. And then you've got Alabama and Wisconsin. And why those two? They are clearly the 2 best non-conference winners. They are the only 2 teams with 1 loss. Everybody else that would be considered had at least 2 losses. Miami, TCU, Washington, Penn State, etc. So it's Alabama, Wisconsin. Now, how do you rank them? Do you make the group of 5 automatically number 8? Or do you go by, as Bosch Gaming suggested there, do you go by the rankings? I'd have to think about that. Do you think you and the guy from ST1 Sports will ever do a live stream together? So he has suggested this. He has also suggested the call-in show, NCIS Fanatic 21. It was funny because I'm thinking of that. And he asked me the other night, he said, would you like to do a call-in show? Because I think you would be really good at that. And I said, absolutely. I've been thinking about that for a long time. Bosch Gaming. Well, then this year it would be Clemson, Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma, Georgia, Central Florida, Alabama, Wisconsin. Exactly. What a playoff that would have been. Let's say Clemson was the 1. They played Central Florida, the 8. I'm just throwing out seedings. There's your first round game. Of course, Georgia was a 2. Let's say Wisconsin would have been a 7. That would have been a nice game. Oklahoma the 3. USC the 6. USC probably not up to it this year. It didn't look to be, but I still want to provide them the opportunity since they won a conference championship. It's like if in the NFL they said, you know what, the AFC West sucked this year. And sometime before the playoffs started, at the end of the regular season, they said, we're going to keep the AFC West out of the playoffs this year because it was awful. And so Denver, you went 9-7, but you know what? Sorry, the division sucked, so we'll leave you out. You guys like SD1 Sports? So, what do you like about SD1 Sports? I'm just curious because the guy there is a great guy and has reached out to me in the last month, and we've been able to collaborate. And he's able to pick off some of my videos and include them over there. I would have put in Penn State in over Central Florida. I'm not in favor of putting the group of 5 champion in the playoffs. So you've got to include the group of 5, or else you have to say you know what? You're not included. We're going to be very blunt and very straightforward. We have fooled you all these years and actually made you think that you had a shot, but you have no shot. Bye. Go play your own playoff. That's what needs to happen. If they have no shot, otherwise they need an opportunity. Even if it's not as fair an opportunity as the Power Five, they need to at least know while they're playing football all season that, hey, if I win a conference championship, I may not get to the national playoff, but at least one of our conference champions will. Yeah, like SG1 Sports. Do you think you and the guy? Okay. I can see the 5 conference champions plus 3 wild cards. That makes the most sense, Mark. I agree. Because an 18 playoff top 8 teams is better than 4. Can you get some from Washington to talk about the Auburn game? Yeah, we used to have a guy, Aaron Seavercrop from, I believe he was from SB Nation, used to come on and talk Washington football. He still follows me on Twitter, but for some reason he doesn't respond to my messages. So he has not been on for a long time. In an 18 playoff, according to Panther Pro 22, should there be designated places for all 5 conference champions, designated spot for a group of 5, or should they pick the 8 best teams? There you go with the 8 best teams. We don't know who the 8 best teams are. You mean the 8 most deserving, the ones that earned it? Sure. So yeah, let's think about it. Let's go back to Bosch Gaming's 8 seeds. Last year, well, we talked about last year, 2016, Florida State. They were the number 8 team. So Florida State in 2016, was that the year? 2016, this past year was obviously a train wreck. So the 2016 team beat Michigan in the Orange Bowl. That was a good team that lost to Clemson in a close game. And they lost, I forget who else beat Florida State in 2016 that kept them out of the. Oh, they lost that train wreck of a game against Louisville. And I want to say Lamar Jackson, but he shouldn't be given credit for that. That was the Louisville defense that won that game. So they gave up 63 points in that game. They lost to Louisville. And then once they lost to Clemson, obviously they were knocked out of the ACC race, but then they rallied. They played well down the stretch. They beat Michigan by 1 point in the Orange Bowl. So that Florida State team, sure, they could have played in the playoff. Clemson beat Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. Virginia Tech had 3 losses, so they would not have been considered. 2015 was Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame gets made fun of a lot, and right here at Mark Rogers TV as well by many of you, but people who say they need to join a conference, and I agree, because I hate trying to compare Notre Dame and what they're doing with everyone else. But in 2015, boy, they came awfully close. They were really good. They only missed the playoff because they lost to Stanford on the last play of the game. They came all the way down the field, scored a touchdown to take the lead, and then Stanford put together a couple pass plays, and they kicked the game-winning field goal and knocked Notre Dame out of the playoff. Now, that Notre Dame team went and played Ohio State, which I will contend was the most talented team in the country. I think the NFL draft proved that in April. And Notre Dame really didn't challenge Ohio State. They didn't get blown out, but they lost 44-28, and that game wasn't close. So I don't know if Notre Dame would have been much of a factor in the 2015 playoffs. That Alabama team and Clemson, they were the 2 best teams, and Ohio State would have certainly made it interesting in a semifinal game situation. But Oklahoma and especially Michigan State obviously couldn't hang. 2014 was Michigan State. And of course, we would have had Baylor and TCU in the playoff. Interesting to note that Baylor being left out of the playoff in 2014 as a conference champion, co-champion, and the team that beat TCU head-to-head. And we just had our guy Billy Wessels on from Rivals talking about TCU, and he is so adamant 4 years later that TCU was the best team in the country in 2014. They were really good, and they won the Peach Bowl and blasted Ole Miss. But, man, TCU, at that point, the Big 12 was awful. They were not the best team in the country. They were the fifth best team in the country. Alabama was better. Oregon was better. Of course, Ohio State was better. Maybe they were the fourth best team in the country. But Michigan State, what I was getting to was that Michigan State in 2014, of course, beat Baylor, and Baylor was supposed to be able to wipe them off the field. They should have been in the college football playoff, and Michigan State came back from 20 down in the fourth quarter and beat them 42-41. Great game at the Cotton Bowl. I think we would have rolled through Clemson and Bama in 15. Well, rolled through them? I don't think so. But if Ohio State would have had their heads screwed on in that season, Lamar Stevens, and he does the video game simulation thing based on his rating system or others' rating system. So, man, you guys have to convince me on this video game business. So that works extremely well for SG1 Sports, and he does a great job with that. But I got to tell you, who in the world is sitting around watching a video game simulations? I don't get it. And you guys love it, or somebody loves it out there because he gets a lot more views than I do, rambling on about college football. But I just don't get saying, oh, I want to watch the Chicago Bears 2018 simulated season. And then I see some plays that obviously are made up and computer generated players on the field, and then phony statistics that don't mean anything and won't come anywhere close to most of the time the actual stats once we get to that point, and then a score that says Chicago beat Detroit 28-27. I don't get it. So anyway, Lamar, enjoy yourself with that. SG1 is a matrix-based system for predicting a team's overall talent based on returning production, recruiting, and stuff. So is that the for college football or pro? Because I've seen that they have predictions, but I think they're just taking the power index and comparing their predictions against the power index, which I've seen have been very close, and that makes sense because unless you're going to go out on a limb. Thank you, NCIS Fanatic 21. Florida State lost to North Carolina 37-35. So they lost. Did they lose 3 games that year? They were 9-3 and beat Michigan and finished 10-3. Yes, they did. Florida State at number 8 going to the playoff that year at 9-3. Don't know that I would have been there. So Florida State. So the thing we have to consider there, Bosch Gaming, is you were looking up the final rankings. You were looking up the final rankings. We would be going by the rankings going into the playoffs, going into the postseason. So Florida State wouldn't have been that high. They would not have made it. But anyway, I appreciate you jumping in with those. And so we were just going with it. Yeah, FSU lost to North Carolina 37-35. Mitch Trubisky. I still remember watching that game. I was not watching the game. I was watching another game and saw that it was going down to the wire, and I flipped to ABC, and there it was. Yeah. Another guy you might like, Mark, is College Football Lifer, but he seems to be on a bit of a hiatus and rarely uploads on his channel anymore for some bizarre reason. Thorough, informative, professional. Keep up the good work, Mark. Thank you, Wayland Media. I have not seen you comment before, so I appreciate you jumping on board, and I apologize if I'm a bit relaxed here, but I'm a bit relaxed here. I like the schedule predictions from SG1 Sports. So I can certainly make game predictions. It's not difficult. And I would never knock what SG1 Sports does. Again, he's a great guy. We have collaborated, and he's doing some great work over there. I guess the thing that I tried to do last year is actually show. So, for example, 2 years ago, Pitt beat Clemson. Now, had I come on here before the season and run down Clemson's schedule and said Pitt's going to beat Clemson, I would have never heard the end of it. And that's one of the reasons why I put percentages next to the games, meaning this is the percentage probability that this is going to happen. Pitt was not better than Clemson 2 years ago. Give them all the credit. They went to Clemson and won. They won the game. That's all that matters. But we all know that Pitt, they lost 5 games. They weren't better than Clemson, but they had a probability. They had a chance of winning. It might have been 10 or 15%, but it pulled through that particular game. If they would have played Clemson 10 times, they probably would have lost 9 times. So what I did going into last year was I gave you everyone's schedule, and I gave you 2 things. I gave you the probability that they would win that game. Then I also predicted the game. Because if you just want to go through a schedule and look and see who the favorite is and who the underdog is, well, I don't know what that is. That's pretty obvious. Basically, look at anybody's schedule. Look at Ohio State's schedule. They've got 8 wins for sure. Then they've got 4 games that they're going to be favored in. So they could go 12-0, or they could slip up against one team. And that's most likely what everybody thinks is going to happen. Is that Ohio State's going to slip up one time and lose to Michigan State on the road or Penn State on the road, and they're going to go 11-1. Or they're the best team versus all those other teams. They're the more talented team, and they're going to be the favorite unless they really falter. They're going to be the favorite in every game. So you could say Ohio State's going to go 12-0. Yeah, I just don't see the value in that in that content myself. But so predictions, people love predictions, and I make predictions during the season. The safest thing to do, I guess, is what I'm getting at, is just to predict the favorites in each game. And then in total, you're going to look the best. It's like playing the NCAA tournament bracket. And are you going to just pick chalk? And most likely, aside from maybe choosing a couple 3s or 2s they could get through, if you pick chalk, it's been proven that you have the best chance of winning a bracket. Or are you going to really try to determine, knowing there are going to be upsets? Can I find those upsets? And do I have the guts to pull the trigger to predict those upsets? It's the same thing in the college football season. I can tell you that Clemson's going to be favored in 12 games, and maybe they slip up once and they're going to go 11-1. There you go. There's my video. Miami's favored in 12 games. They may slip up once. They should go 11-1. And you could do that with every team. But let's look back at last season and then look at the way these teams were perceived to start the season. And there are upsets. Iowa State over TCU. Iowa State over Oklahoma. Michigan State over Penn State. Boston College at the time was a huge underdog against Louisville. Now, by the end of the year, we saw that BC was pretty good and comparable to Louisville. But at the time, that was an upset. Nobody thought BC was going to beat Louisville. They did. So if we're just going by chalk, then I can tell you what's going to happen this year. Clemson's going to go and win the Atlantic Division with 11 or 12 wins. Florida State's going to have 8 or 9 wins. NC State's going to have 7 or 8 wins. Wake Forest is going to have 7 or 8 wins. Syracuse is going to have 4 or 5 wins. Boston College is going to have 6 or 7 wins. There's your division. In the Coastal, Miami's going to win 11. Virginia Tech's going to win 8. Georgia Tech's going to win 7. Pitt's going to win 6. North Carolina's going to win 4 or 5. Virginia is going to win 5 or 6. I think I missed Duke. They're going to win 7. There you go. Clemson's going to beat Miami in the ACC championship game. They're going to win it 31-21. There you go. Upset alerts. SG1 calls them trap games. So, yeah, that would be a good video. We could go through possible upsets for this season. SG1 is just one of us with a bit more time and effort. Yeah, and it's a great thing, Lamar. Again, and his videos look a lot better than mine, that's for sure. He puts the nice thumbnail on them. He's got some graphics and a lot of things that I keep saying I'm going to do, but I keep sitting here just talking football because that's what I love to do. And that's one of the reasons why we've collaborated so well, and it's been a good thing for both of us, is SG1 has said, hey, you know, we like what you do. We like the analysis. We would like to be able to let you do more of that, and we can post the videos and put on the graphics and get it in front of more eyeballs because they've got like 12,000 subscribers and I only have 4. So that's nice. For college football, it's comparison-based type stuff. Penn State was clearly better than USC in my opinion, but by making conference champions get a spot, USC gets in over them. USC is more deserving, but I think Penn State is better. And that's fine, Panther Pro. Totally get it. I think Alabama was better than a lot of teams, maybe all of them last year, but they didn't win their conference. And I thought they were better. What's funny is I got bashed for saying that Alabama should not be in the playoff last year. And then I went ahead and picked them to win the Clemson game and the Georgia game. And I was right on both occasions. So some people are probably saying you're contradicting yourself. No, I'm not. I said that they didn't earn a playoff spot. That doesn't mean I didn't believe that they had a great chance of winning the college football playoff, and they did it. Gators just got put out of the College World Series. Boy, there was a day and time in which I went to 2 College World Series back with Mississippi State. So maybe this will come up on the video or the live stream that I post at some point when I talk about my career. So I may get nobody to watch that, but I just thought it might be. I'm not gonna fool myself into thinking it's interesting. But you guys watch me on a regular basis, that you would like to know who you're listening to. What are my credentials? What have I done? What gives me the right to say anything? Well, we all have a platform. Obviously, we all have the right. It's free speech. We can say whatever we want. But I would at some point like to let you guys know where I've been, what I've done, and see if you guys have any questions about my background and my career. We'll do that at some point. But yeah, I went to 2 College World Series with Mississippi State, 1996 and 7. And that's when I was covering. I'd never been around college baseball before and went to station WCBI, CBS station in Mississippi, and worked there for 6 years and covered the SEC on the sidelines, in the press box, up close and personal. So I still cover the SEC, but I just do it from afar. But at that point, I did it in the press box and on the sidelines and the locker rooms and the whole deal. Interviewed all the coaches and players every week. But college baseball was something I got acquainted with that I was not familiar with, except for seeing a little bit on TV on ESPN, but never covered it until I went to the SEC, and it was impressive. I would love to know about your career, Mark. So I got one. Actually, it was very interesting about one of my very best friends, Marty McPadden. He owns a production company. He used to work with me at ESPN, worked at ESPN for 19 years. He formed his own production company, and we started a show a few years ago called Behind the Scenes Live. And his thought was that he would deal with this would be a show where we would teach people how to do television production. And with his background, he thought he would do all the behind the scenes in terms of camera settings and camera purchases and lighting and miking and audio and staging. And he went way beyond all that as well. And that I would do all the on camera, how to report, how to write a story, how to just anything dealing with on the camera stuff. And we had a blast doing this for we probably did 20 of them. And I should have him send those to me, and maybe I'll post those, because if you're into the television industry and now the online industry, so it's not just television, obviously, it's not just linear, it's digital, it's online with what we deal with. It's where we get most of our entertainment now. But it was a fascinating show that we did, and we had some great guests. Cam Underwood came on because he's what was I going to say? Cam Underwood is a choir instructor, a vocal teacher, a voice teacher, and he came on to talk about that. So that was one guest that you would recognize. Neville, a little bit about myself and my credentials to be able to rate you the best sports talk show guy. I've been watching sports and sports commentary pretty much most of my life. That's it. Hey, that's good enough for me, Neville. We all have our various tastes, and my goal is I don't want to appear to be like up here and talking down to my audience. We're all fans. We all love college football. At the same time, I want to be respected. I want to be considered legitimate and credible. And that's another thing that comes up that's kind of funny is sometimes if people say your opinion sucks, and it's basically they judge it because I've got a blank wall behind me, and because I don't have that many subs, and because they think I'm some kind of loser that just does this for whatever reason. And then I tell them two things. First of all, you don't know my background. You don't know my experience. And unless you actually watch and listen to videos, please don't judge somebody on YouTube or online just based on how many subs they have. Just because you've got a lot of subs doesn't mean you're really good. So I don't look down on somebody or look up to somebody based on the number of views or the subs. Sure, that's what we're all looking for. But I've seen YouTubers who have 300 subscribers who are tremendous talents. And I've seen other people with 100,000 subscribers who really don't know what they're talking about or aren't that talented. I never thought you have talked down to any of us. We always have great and friendly conversations. Yes, absolutely. You've got the best topics and conversations, audio quality, Jonathan. So despite the lack of bells and whistles and graphics and all that other business, Jonathan, you bring up one point is as long as I've had clear transmission, clear video, clear audio, that's the one thing I'm striving for at this point. But I would love to have all the other stuff. And the one thing about having my buddy Marty was that he was producing a show for me. I don't know if any of you were on board long ago enough to know this, that he was with me we did a signing day show. So that must have been about this time last year, a little bit earlier. And he basically produced my show for me and added graphics and brought in the guests, and it was great. But he just has too much going on to do that. All right. Can you drink at college baseball? Need a lot of beer to watch baseball. Fill in, not a baseball fan. I am fill in. Big baseball fan. Used to be a bigger baseball fan before I started doing this. So with the downfall of SEC country, might you talk to some of those guys on the near future? Yeah, I heard about that the other day. And actually, some of the last conversations we had about some teams like Auburn and LSU and Texas A&M about right around spring practice time. Lamar was with SEC country guys, and they were good. I liked all of them, and maybe it was because, and they all seemed to enjoy being on, and definitely told me afterwards, "Hey, I'll be on anytime. Just let me know." And for some reason, I couldn't get a hold of them after that. And many of them still follow me on Twitter. So maybe it was because, unfortunately, they were scrambling to find something else and just didn't want to come on and talk college football. You don't need graphics, Mark. Your channel is awesome the way it is. So if you guys have noticed, NCIS Fanatic 21 brings up a good point, is that I've told you many times that now I do the live stream and it just posts the whole thing. Where in the past, what I was doing up until about a month ago was I would shoot a live uh, stream with somebody, but I would put it on private. Therefore, you guys couldn't see it. So I'd have on a guest. We'd talk that particular team and talk to the guest for a half hour. And then I would download it. And then I would edit that into segments. And the one nice thing about that is, number one, if you're just interested in hearing about Shea Patterson, then you would get the 3 minutes on Shea Patterson, and you wouldn't watch the rest of it because you didn't care about recruiting and Michigan tradition or whatever. And you would just watch that. The other part of it is that I would edit the video. Therefore, I'd put on the intro that would have the music and the logo. And also I would put on the graphic, which it does help identify me, NCIS Fanatic 21, and I've got nothing here. Now, there's some stuff on YouTube that I could use that I forget about, that I could at least put my name right there and my Twitter handle like I used to. So I used to have some graphics on. Too bad 28. It is nice to see comprehensive breakdowns. Styles make fights. Talent is great, but are there scheme advantages, experience differences, teams trending up or down to help decide who wins games? I don't know what you're talking about there. Maybe you're talking to somebody else. Ohio State is predicted to lose to Maryland. Okay. I would be a bit surprised by that, but if somebody's stepping out to make that pick, sure. There are going to be a couple games like that this season. Maybe Oklahoma loses to another Iowa State type team, or Ohio State loses to Maryland, or Wisconsin falls to Minnesota. That would be surprising. All right. I think I've knocked through everything. Fill in. I suffered through the Cubs. Who says we are going to lose to Maryland? I guess SG1, according to what I was reading there. NCIS Fanatic 21. So again, I'm going to ask you guys to do me a favor. And if you have any friends or family who like college football, I was going to say love college football, but even if they just like college football, and things seem to ramp up once we get to late August, because a lot of people that are just sports fans and they don't watch college football the whole year, don't keep up with it. But then once the season starts, they want to dive into college football, and the rest of the year they're watching the NBA and the NFL, and I shouldn't say the NFL because that's the same season, but they're watching the NBA and they're watching golf or tennis or baseball all summer, whatever, or just enjoying themselves outside. Then they come around the first week of college football and they find people like me. So whoever out there in your life likes college football and would like to, and even if they just like a particular team, and I cover that team, and I try to cover everyone. So just don't think that I cover the teams and talk about the teams that I do because those are the only ones that I care about. It just comes down to time and not having the resources or the contributors in certain areas. For example, Wisconsin. I would like to talk more Wisconsin football. I would like to talk more Oklahoma. I'd like to talk more Virginia Tech or Michigan State, but I don't have those guests right now. I have in the past, but not right now. All right. ST1 Sports Trap Game Alert. So I'm guessing he's just basically saying that they could lose that game but it's not necessarily a game he's predicting they lose. All right, very good. So thanks for joining me on the live stream. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And please subscribe. And please like and comment. You guys, I know that it's a bit of a pain and you may forget from time to time. But if you like the video, then hit the like button, because YouTube takes account of that in analytics, and that helps me and helps the channel, and it helps circulation, and it puts me in the suggested videos. And if you comment, the same thing happens. And definitely watch the videos, and please subscribe, Mark Rogers TV. And if you bring the most subscribers before July 15th, then of course you get your swag from Alonzo1219. I appreciate you guys jumping on board. I'll be back sometime tomorrow. We'll talk some college football definitely tomorrow. Yes, I'm on Google Plus, meaning Google Play. I think you mean there. Google Plus, Google Play. Yes. So the audio, NCIS Fanatic 21, is on Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher, which is basically just the stripped down version, the audio of these videos on YouTube. All right, everyone. We appreciate you jumping on board, listening to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We always enjoy the conversation. I could stay on here all night and talk college football, but I will think of another good topic for tomorrow, and we will again discuss, debate, and analyze college football. Panther Pro, yes, and everyone else, we will see you next time.